Hey, everybody. A few weeks ago, we started bringing back some essential Heretics 101 content. For today, Athena's CPO challenges empathy-driven management, exposes toxic executive dynamics, and advocates for logic over emotion in workplace leadership. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the HR Heretics podcast. Today, we're talking to Melanie Naranjo, which I'm so excited about.
Melanie, thanks for joining HR Heretics. We're so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be chatting with you two today.
So happy.
Hell yeah. So I actually want to get into Athena first. So it's interesting that you are an HR person at an HR company. Tell us a little bit about Athena and how you met Roxanne and that whole story, please.
So Athena, we're a compliance company, which let's just put it out there. That sounds pretty boring if you think about it, right? Okay, harassment prevention training, not very exciting, right? But what I think is more interesting is two things. One is the truth is that when I joined Athena, Roxanne, who's my CEO and my manager, she really did think that HR was just payroll and benefits. And for the record, she's been open about this and she has since changed her mind. But what's fascinating to me on that front is that we are literally an HR tech company. And even within an HR tech company who is selling to HR buyers, this is a misunderstanding. This is an actual problem. And so, luckily, Roxanne had lots of humility, asked lots of questions. She has since changed her mind. We work so closely together. The second reason why I think it's so fascinating is because now that we are past that, right? Now that we are, in sync, we chat, we really see each other as thought leaders and partners and all of that stuff. The amount of impact that I've been able to have from the HR perspective, given that I literally am the person that we are selling to, has been just huge. And I have to say, for anyone who's unhappy at their current job and is looking for a better way, I think working for an HR tech company that gets the HR business case, it just takes such a load off your plate when you don't have to constantly fight to prove the value of HR.
Melanie, given that you have spent a lot of time, I'm assuming spent a lot of time with Athena's buyer, tell us, what are your general learnings of HR leaders and what are your takeaways?
Oh, that's such a great question because I think there are so many different categories of HR leaders. You've got people who are first-time HR leaders. Maybe they've been thrown into it unwillingly. So I see this quite often. You joined as a recruiter for a startup and suddenly you're the head of HR, but you've never done anything in the HR space. And now you need to advocate for HR things. You're responsible for hiring a compliance provider. You don't even know what the compliance laws are. And then there's a leader who's, they've been in the game for a while. They've been here maybe 10, 15, 20 years, but maybe they're sick of doing all the admin stuff. They don't want to be thinking about your compliance or your another performance review. They're sort of past that already. My take on it is that honestly, I think that we are all super disconnected and we're not talking to each other. I think there's a lot of a sense of isolation. I think there's a lot of bitterness happening. And I have all the empathy in the world that I think that our jobs keep getting harder and harder and we don't have an outlet to talk about some of the things that we're struggling with. I also think that sometimes because we are so siloed, because we are so disparate, we sort of get in this cycle of autopilot and dwelling in what's not working versus, hey, this isn't working. Let's do something different. Hey, I'm really frustrated about this. Do you know what? I'm tired of venting. I'm going to actually do something about it. I think we're in this really tough spot right now where people are really struggling to sort of pull themselves out of that dark place.
Why do you think that is? You mentioned bitterness. I absolutely noticed this as it's kind of like a big theme right now from my perspective in the HR community. Why do you think that is?
And I'd love to know, what does it look like, Melanie? What does it look and feel like? What does that mean?
So I think what it looks like is, to be honest, I don't think that you always get the best of us. I think that sometimes we are half-assing it. Sometimes we are just doing the bare minimum to get by because we are so burnt out. We are so exhausted. And you know what? The last time I put my heart and soul into a project, it got vetoed, or I got buy-in to do it. I spent 3 months working on it. And then at the last minute, I got all this pushback and never mind, it's not going to happen. Go do something else. Right. And so again, I always approach with empathy. I don't think anyone's doing it intentionally, but I think understandably after months, years of this kind of response, it ends up looking like I'm just not going to give you my all anymore because I physically, mentally cannot anymore. I think we have to take a step back to really understand the full context here, which is, this is my opinion, okay? I think HR is a really unique industry in that, or field in that up until, I want to say the last few years, I don't think most people sort of grew up dreaming of being in HR. I think HR was a field and a function that people sort of fell into either because they couldn't find something else, they weren't sure what else they wanted to do, somebody saw some empathy in them and they were like, clearly you must be in HR. And for the record, I put myself in this bucket. I didn't dream of being in HR. And so I think you bring together a bunch of people who might not necessarily have been passionate about this thing. Then on top of that, you don't really empower them. So you say, hey, you've got a bunch of responsibility, but no authority. Your authority comes with the power to influence. That's your authority. And so then they bring things to you. They don't do it in the right way. Say, for example, they just don't have business savvy. So they think that an effective business case is because the employees would really like it. I got the vibe. They're really upset. And I think this would make them happy. And then what happens? The CEO dismisses them because they're not speaking the CEO's language. They're using terms like happiness. They're using terms like it feels like the right thing to do. Of course they're being dismissed, right? But no one takes the time to give them that feedback explicitly and say, hey, let me explain to you why your case was significantly less compelling than the case that our head of sales just brought to me. Nobody does that. So we just get in this cycle of feeling disempowered, not getting ahead, no one giving us the feedback on how to get better. And eventually, understandably, we just assume, well, either I suck or they just don't get me. So I'm going to give up.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Your workforce is your organization's greatest strength and often its largest single expense. But without the right tools, understanding where your workforce spend is going or how it impacts your bottom line can be a challenge. That's where Planful comes in. With Planful, HR and finance teams get the clarity they need to make smarter workforce decisions, gain real-time visibility into workforce fluctuations, forecast with confidence, and adjust talent acquisition plans collaboratively based on costs today and into the future. No more guesswork, just data-driven insights to help you plan with accuracy. And the best part, Planful is fast and easy to implement, so you can be up and running in weeks, not months, with minimal IT support. Plus, as your company grows, Planful grows with you, providing endless runway for strategic workforce planning at any scale. Ready to take your workforce planning to the next level? Join over 1,500 organizations already using Planful. Visit planful.com/heretics to learn more.
I must admit, I used to believe that AI didn't actually exist in recruiting or HR. That is until my friend Heather Doche, who leads talent at Signalfire, told me to check out Metaview. I got into the product and was like, wow, AI actually does exist in recruiting, and this product is sick. Metaview is the world's #1 AI scribe built specifically for recruiting. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes everything. With perfect notes from every conversation, your people can focus on creating a human connection with candidates, and they can save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Metaview covers all your compliance needs, works with all your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at organizations like Brex, Deel, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts. Tell them that me and Kelli sent you. Or you could just go to their website and get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
Generally speaking, you'd assume those of us in HR, heads of people, have high EQ, right? We have good intuition, we empathize. And it's also one of those roles where you can't just go do stuff, right? Like I was hanging out with a salesperson, they just go do it. I got this. And they just kind of like paint and they go. And we have to be a lot more methodical. You have to win hearts and minds. You have to influence people. And that takes a big toll. I mean, it's a different weight of stuff here. And you're right, when it keeps getting shut down, down, and you have high EQ, I mean, you're kind of like, why am I going to keep running my head against the wall? That phenomenon, I think, is very real.
I actually have a pretty strong opinion on something you just said in terms of the EQ side of things. Yes, of course, EQ is very important. We need to have it, right? It's a muscle you learn if you don't have it naturally. And also, I actually had a manager who for years just really explicitly, blatantly, consistently shamed me for not being emotional enough. Melanie, you need more empathy. Melanie, this person said this thing and I didn't see a single emotion cross your face. And she just really drilled into me that this was a bad thing for HR. You need to have emotions. You need to really care about happiness. You need all these things. And I have to say, I actually have found that to be an incredible weakness for people in the HR field. I think that the greatest value you can bring when dealing with high emotion situations is actually being able to set your own emotions aside for a second and look at things really neutrally. I think that high functioning HR people actually don't lead with their emotions. They lead with logic. They lead with, with data, statistics. I actually think it's just wrong when people are sort of like, oh, you're an emotional person. You like empathize a ton. You would be great in HR. Actually, I don't know that you would be great in HR because there are going to be a lot of high stress emotional situations and you might end up taking sides. You might not be able to handle it.
That is so well said, Melanie. It's not about, I think it's actually about emotional regulation and also using logic to solve problems. Because typically when emotion is involved, stakes are high and problem is probably really big. And so in order to solve that problem, having emotional maturity to stay in control of those emotions, to de-escalate folks, and then to switch the mode in our brain. I totally agree with you, but I don't see like the HR community pushing for what you just said. And I'm left wondering like why that is the case and why your opinion is not more widely shared.
That's a great question. I mean, do you know what? I'll answer it, but I'm curious to hear what you two think, actually.
Well, and I had a question on community because I feel like every time I look up, there's still a lot of silos. So I'm also wondering, like, what is the nut to crack here?
I think that there's a monoculture in HR that is accepted. And then anything outside of that monoculture that doesn't appeal to HR safety is the way I would describe it. So making HR leaders feel safe with their venting it's thought of as like, well, you're on the outside and you're not here to help us. That's my personal belief in what I've experienced.
Okay. Spicy. I love it. Okay. Kelli?
That's why we're here. I think a lot of people, to your point, fell into HR, right? And to me, following that thread logically, if you fall into something, that means you haven't really thought about it a ton. Maybe you don't have a super strong point of view on what it is. And so the expectations of others imprint on you and you become that thing. Like I've seen HR people get rattled. Like an employee is like, you are this, you should be this, you should be a therapist, you should be, right? We talked about knitting HR sweaters last episode. Like you should be the mother hen and that's the job.
I don't think that there's a whole lot of formal education around the concept of HR. I think to your point, Kelli, people get thrown in, right? And it's sort of like, figure it out. And I don't want to hear about this. Just make the problem go away. There's no intentional, let's think about what an effective HR philosophy looks like. I think my spicier take, which I always try to be really careful in my wording here, because I think it could land poorly and be received incorrectly, is I think that there is a gendered element to this. And what I mean by that is if you look at the demographic of the HR function, the majority of us identify as women. Many of us identify as women of color. If you look around a room of executives, right, there might oftentimes just be one woman in that executive room, and it's the head of HR, right? And I think oftentimes what can happen is if someone is not presenting something in a way that lands, they just dismiss the person, right? Instead of having a real intentional conversation about it. There is very much a gender dynamic when you are the only woman in a senior room and you say something and everyone just looks at you like that was a dumb idea, but no one explains why, right? So I think that we do need to think about power dynamics of all kinds when we're talking about HR and in relation to any other department and the overall executive team.
It's also this like cabal thing that happens. And I call it like, do you all have conversations above the table or do you have them under, after, like in dyad or triad chats or texts? Like, is it all above board or is it this weird thing where like something happens, like people kind of ignore Melanie in a meeting and then like two other, insecure executive team members get wind that maybe Melanie's on the outs. So it's real and it's immature. And these are executives and these are adults. But I'm telling you, the insecurities, sometimes the greed, sometimes the ego. I don't know, like the cocktail changes company to company, but I've seen it. It's very dysfunctional. And that was like, honestly, my main filter. I would talk to founder CEOs or vet out new opportunities around this dynamic that you can't really measure and you can barely touch it and feel it, but it's a tsunami when it happens and it's brutal.
Couldn't agree more. I firmly believe that people will fill in the gaps. And I think it's just human nature, right? We're trying to make sense of things. We want to understand things. And so if something is unspoken, we will fill it in with our own assumptions. If I present something and nobody comments or people just say like some positive stuff, but they don't have any real conversations, I'm going to fill in the gaps with, okay, either they don't trust that I can take the feedback, or they weren't even listening, or they've all decided that I'm already bad at my job. And so in the absence of communication, all these horrible misunderstandings and assumptions get made. And I think that so many leadership teams are so entrenched in politics and working against each other instead of with each other that, one, I don't think most people want to ask for their fellow exec's opinion because they personally don't even care for it. They're like, you're wrong. I already don't like you. I think you're bad at your job. You were passive aggressive in that last meeting. Your opinion, quite frankly, doesn't matter to me. And second, I think tied into those politics, right? No. This is leverage you're going to use against me. I don't want to be vulnerable with you right now. I'm presenting, a tough front. I think there are actually some deeper issues that most leadership teams would probably need to work through before they even got to the point of being comfortable asking a question. And I think it's beyond ego, in my opinion. At those companies, there's someone who's pushing that agenda. Do you know what I mean? Like that happens because a CEO is rewarding, right? Okay,
You took the
Kelli,
words
your
right out of
thoughts.
my mouth. Like it always stems from that, right? Are you allowing this to happen? Are you exacerbating it? Are you biased in some exec members versus others? Or, and I will give Todd Olson, Pendo's CEO, a shit ton of credit here. The guy doesn't care where you came from, if you've been there 8 years, a month, if you go to dinner and drinks, if you don't. He literally, I don't know if it's just a chip in his head is not there. He doesn't play into this. And I think it's phenomenal. I mean, it literally has created an atmosphere where you know that if you politic all damn day long, you're still not going to get leverage because the guy just sees everyone. It's great. And how do we create more of that, right? And if you don't have that microchip or not have it in his case, I don't know which one, how are you leaning on your HR leader, someone that you trust to call your stuff out and make sure that it's healthy? Because once that room becomes unhealthy, it all flows down from there.
That's exactly the question I was going to ask, which is when you don't have somebody like Todd, who's the CEO, I think what you're describing, Kelli, by the way, is an idea meritocracy, like to where it's just about the ideas and the merit of those ideas versus where they come from or who said it. When you don't have a Todd as your CEO, then how do you solve that problem? In my mind, it's basically just like you have to try and terminate the person who's causing the toxicity or leave. Am I missing something in that logic?
Well, I don't actually think it's just about being a meritocracy. I think it's about having a clear and aligned vision. I think most companies, there's a tendency to favor one department over another. So the sales team is the most important, or the engineering team is the most important, right? And I think that then stirs up these issues, right? As opposed to, no, we are a united team and we have a company goal. How is any idea that we are presenting ultimately helping the company? I think where it needs to start is, are we as a company aligned on what our singular goal is and how it is that we get there? And then any idea that gets brought to the table needs to ultimately feed into that goal, not be pitting us against each other.
Right. And sometimes not, but usually, right, if you ask that founder CEO, like, what is this? Well, they're not good. They're not performing. Well, that's fine. And that very well may be true, but that's a different conversation, a different how than what might be going on with this phenomenon that we're talking about of either ignoring them or avoiding them, right? And it's just not a good way of doing business, because what does that do? It actually impacts the business.
I will say, when there's a performance issue, it is important that you act really quickly as possible, and as transparently and directly as possible. At Ethena, we have these 3 questions that we have all managers ask themselves of their teams every, I don't know, like, let's say once a quarter or periodically, but the idea is they know these in the back of their mind all the time. Is this person ultimately making my job easier or harder? If I could go back in time knowing what I know today, would I hire them again? And if they were to quit today, how would I feel? Panicked, relieved, neutral? And the idea of that is to remove the emotional element. Because oftentimes if you ask someone, is someone a high performer? You get all these like hemming and hawing, like, they're really good at this, but they're really nice. And they're good for morale. It's like, no. I didn't hire them for morale. I hired them to get the job done. So tell me, ultimately, are they getting their job done?
Do you guys do PIPs? Do you guys believe in PIPs? Or do you try and avoid the PIP process entirely?
I find that this tends to be so controversial. People feel really strongly about this. We don't do PIPs. And I think, personally, my opinion is that most people do PIPs for liability reasons. They just want to have a thing kind of documented, right? But I think that PIPs oftentimes can just be an excuse for, I haven't been giving you feedback for a really long time, so now, retroactively, I'm going to put it all out there. I also think PIPs are incredibly demoralizing. It's sort of like, hey, for the record, in like 30 days, we're probably going to fire you. But, here's what you can try to do and maybe keep I just don't find that to be an effective way to do anything other than to manage someone.
It's totally CYA.
Yeah, 100%. In which case, you might as well just say, listen, you've got 2 options. You can try, or you can take a separation package. Which one do you want? I don't see why we have to sort of play this song and dance around like, let's pretend that we actually believe in this. We don't do that. At Ethena, we're pretty direct. We have regular feedback discussions, but when someone's job is on the line, our managers are explicitly required to say, you are not meeting expectations. And after a couple of weeks, if things still haven't improved, they're required to say, listen, your job is currently at risk. And if I don't see improvement in the next few weeks, the reality is we're going to be having a different conversation about whether or not you can continue to stay employed at the company. And we do this again for full transparency, so that the person actually has a chance to turn things around, to ask questions. Maybe there's an underlying issue that they haven't spoken up about and I can help. But no, we don't do PIPs. We just do really candid feedback. And then eventually we make a tough decision if necessary, or people turn things around. And for the record, sometimes people turn things around.
Feedback is it's amazing how easy it is when you're just direct, but also just talking to the person like a human, right? Direct, but equal. Hey, like, what do you think? I'm concerned. This isn't working. What do you want to do? Versus, you are missing. It's just that sometimes the approach and the tone is most of it. It's not actually the feedback or the outcome.
Totally. And I will say, most people kind of suck at feedback. They just don't know how to go into specifics. They lead with emotions. It's very vague. Again, going back to my manager, you're just not empathetic enough. What does that mean? And how is that tied into the business? How's that part of my job? I think most people they're not specific enough. And so then understandably, that person can't even receive the feedback.
Melanie, this was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your learnings with us. Before we let you go, do you have any advice for people leaders?
My recommendation would be twofold. One, find your space for release. I think there's a lot of pent up stress and bitterness. I think find your place for release, whether that's your own people community, whether that's at home with your friends. And then two, put aside the emotion and focus on the solution in a really logical way. If your leadership team has been, shooting down all your initiatives, instead of saying, oh my gosh, why do they never listen to my initiatives? Why not just say, hey, I haven't been able to convince you in the past 3 times that I rolled out an initiative. Be straight with me. Why not? What would have made it better? How could I have won you up? Instead of getting up in our heads and sort of wallowing in what's not working. And again, I have empathy. I understand why it happens. Realizing that that's not going to solve the problem. Pause and have a real conversation.
So well said, Melanie. Thank you so much for spending the time.
Thank you, Nolan.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.